Hockenheim is the venue for the Fanatec GT2 European Series this weekend. We've had a very lively first race, and more of the same is in prospect. Partly because we got a really good evenly matched grid, and partly because the weather conditions have got it in for the teams, quite frankly. Today it has been squally weather, going from wet to dry at a moment's notice. Cars making their way round to the grid. It's based on a standalone qualifying session with different drivers setting the times from those that did for race one, and they were the start drivers in race one. The qualifying driver is the start driver for race two. We have lost one of the KTMs after race one, a rather damaged car of Stefan Rossina and Sedi Samani, but we do have a grid, and we do have a very interesting race in prospect, especially if we've got a little bit more rain still to come. The cars are making their way round, ready for a 50-minute race with the pit window between 20 and 30 minutes. David Addison and Chaz Draycott trackside, and before we get into race two, there are one or two things to catch up on from earlier on in the day. This is how race one began, with Oliver Freimuth bouncing all the way up the curb at turn one, just avoiding contact. But it was a wet road that faced the teams to begin with, but it was drying all the time. Oliver Freimuth got up the inside of Mark Patterson going through the Spitzkehrer hairpin. Contact was avoided, whereas there was a big spin for the number 7 KTM of Christoph Ulrich. That skipped the car out of second place. There was another off at turn one. A similar KTM of Sedi Samani went around, and it wasn't the last drama he was going to have in the race either. He got back on track, but was having to chase his way up the order. Then it was the turn of David Fairbrother to have an off, running out of road, heading down towards the stadium. And again, that wasn't the last incident that car would be involved in. A spin, and this one picking up some damage for Rupert Atzberger, who went around in, a KTM. Samani then damaged his good and proper going up towards turn two. That brought out the safety car, and in so doing, it delayed the pit window. When we went racing once again, there was just about one racing lap before people dived for the pit lane, but the road was drying out all the time. David Fairbrother suddenly found a KTM in his way, ploughed into the back of the car, and that did for Chris Rosenberger for the moment, as well as for the chances of the Lamborghini. Pit window was open, drivers pitted, 2 went onto slick tyres. Those that were on the wets had to try to brave it out. On the slicks, Anders Fjordbach in the number 33 Audi was absolutely scything through the field. Now, that was being investigated as Jordan Witt got involved with yet another KTM. That was being investigated for a possible pit stop infringement. The regulations said that you can't change tyres. The regulations didn't say that you can't. So therefore, he was allowed to keep the race win. Peter Cox in the 23 KTM working his way through into second place. It was a dominant display on the slick tyres for Anders Fjordbach and Mark Patterson, and so the Audi coming home a winner. It was a somewhat subdued Fjordbach as he got out of the car, but the win remained. So just to clarify, within the regulations, it talks about a mandatory pit stop in which you must do a driver change, and it also talks about a tyre change from wets to slicks or slicks to wets at the allowance of the race director. But the regulations didn't say that you either could or couldn't change tyres within that mandatory pit stop, and therefore, as it was a grey area, the teams were given the benefit of the doubt, if you like, and so the result stands. From now on, if you do change tyres in that pit stop, you will get an extra 48 seconds added on to the pit stop, and if you change them subsequently, the tyre change from one compound to another is a 48-second minimum stop. So the regulation has been clarified effectively, but the result from earlier remains. The only other element to it is that David Fairbrother and Jordan Witt's car being given a 25-second penalty for getting into the back of one of the multitudinous KTMs and causing contact during the course of the race. So it drops the number 9 Lamborghini down to 7th place, having been 4th over the line. Questions will be asked later to make sure you're keeping up on all of these, as penalties and regulations are made to be tighter. Right, grid forming, and of course it is the driver that finished race 1 that starts race 2. That's Luca Piri making his way round to the grid. He will start 6th in the car that he shares with Stefan Rattel. But Chaz, it was a really lively earlier race with only 11 starters. The weather conditions really threw something else at it.
Yeah, they did, and drivers had to really think on their feet. Some of them got caught out just getting that extra bit of confidence. You know, we had the false sense of security for a lot of the KTMs. We saw a lot of them light up the rears and over-rotate the car. Some of them just clipping the wall, some of them not. I wanted to touch again on David Fairbrother's honesty earlier on when he said in the interview that he knew he was going to hit the KTM, but he said he tried to hit it square so that it didn't completely ruin the corner of both cars. And, you know, fair play to him. They both carried on, and we were talking about the resilience of that Lamborghini and the KTM as well. They both survived it and continued the race, but despite having a smaller grid than we'd expect to see, there was amazing, amazing racing. But I believe we have a Gemma with the number 81 machine.
We do indeed. I'm down here with Peter. Peter, there's a little bit of drizzle in the air still. It's threatening to rain once again, isn't it?
Yeah, I hope it starts to rain when the amateurs go in, because I loved it, the start in race 1 in rain. So I think we have a good setup. I have a terrific teammate, so we're very confident we can finish well.
That first race you pushed really, really hard in that opening stint.
Yes, I was very lucky to have a good start, to have a good... I was able to take away some seconds, but then we had a safety car would put everything together, but hoping to push hard when I get in.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Gemma Scott on the grid, and Peter Gerlinks will take over from the very experienced Bert Langin, who will do the opening stint in number 81. You can see it there on the outside of the front row of the grid. The distinctive similar Audi, but in the blue PPG colours on pole position, started this time by Anders Fjordbach. Now, if you finish in the top 3 in your class, you carry extra time in your pit stop into the next race. So, Anders Fjordbach and Mark Patterson have an extra 10 seconds to serve. The Peter Cox and Rupert Atzberger KTM has another 7, and Peter Gerlinks and Bert Langin have 5 top 3 out of the Pro-Am category. Oliver Freimuth, and then the Handstuck Chris Rosenberger, KTM, Christoph Lenz, Christoph Ulrich, 10, 7 and 5 respectively in the AM competition. Right, let's talk Porsche next. The Speed Factory Racing 911 will be driven in the second stint by Aurelius Rustica. He's with Gemma.
Aurelius, you seem to be going very, very well. The performance of the Porsche in race 1 was great. Weather is, of course, a massive factor in the performance as well,
yes,
though.
Yes. No, Porsche very like to wet weather, you know. I'm started from 7th position, they go up to the 2nd. On the wet condition was everything right. But after, you know, we made the maybe wrong position to stay under the same wet tires and lose and go for the pot.
And of course here, starting from the 2nd row, the wind is whipping up a little bit. The rain is still threatening.
Yeah.
Is it going to be a nice start for us?
Yeah, very interesting. We hope. We're looking for the weather, looking maybe the rain will come again. This will be perfect for us.
Thank you very much. Have a good race.
Thank you.
Aurelius Rustica will take over the car from Michael Vergers, who goes first, and he had to cope with deteriorating tyres, as in wets on a drying circuit in the first race. And as he finished, he starts, and that is Michael Vergers then. Very, very experienced driver. If you go back to the late 80s, early 90s, of course, he made his name in the UK in Formula Ford 1600, but there aren't many things he's not raced over the years. Driving standards advisor to the British GT Championship, and all-round good guys. Michael Vergers, good to go in the Porsche.
Good character as well. Thumbs up to the cameras. And I mean, speaking of a good character as well, of course, Hans-Joachim Stuck, who we saw earlier on as well, ever a showman for the cameras after the podium presentation, but amazing to see him in such potent machinery as well. It's not like he's just appeared at Goodwood to drive a car up a hill once. He's properly racing these incredible GT2 cars. He's still got it in him. Yeah. And I mean, just coming back to Aurelius Rustica there in the Porsche in that first race, he certainly hit the nail on the head there, saying the Porsche enjoyed the wet weather. He certainly did as well, because he was flying early on in that race, wasn't he? He was on the move.
And a little bit like at Monza, it took him a lap or two to get really happy and comfortable, and then he was away. Yeah. So, yes, now there's light rain falling at turn 1, we understand. We are 15 seconds away from the start of the race. Pit window between 20 and 30 minutes, 78 seconds for a normal stop before you have to factor in 48 if you want to change tyres, plus the extra so-called compensation time for being in the top 3, the, if you like, success time in the pits. So the grid reduced by 1, the Stefan Rossina, as it would have been started by KTM, very badly damaged in race 1 and hors de combat. The field now accelerates away. The circuit a lot drier than it was a couple of hours ago. Not only have the GT cars been out, so too Clio Cup Europe. Their start delayed due to absolutely torrential rain for a few minutes, but right now this looks like pretty decent weather conditions for our Fanatec GT2 European Series. It is race 4 of the year, and Anders Fjordbach is on pole with Bert Langevin lining up alongside. On the second row of the grid, Michael Vergers goes first in the Speed Factory Racing Porsche, and another hugely experienced driver, Peter Cox, lines up alongside him. There's a gap on row 3 where Stefan Rossina isn't, but Luca Piri in the Audi that he shares with Stefan Rattel lines up 6th. 7th, Christoph Lenz, who is very rapid, the Swiss driver for Sportec in the KTM, and another of the KTMs alongside, started now by Klaus Angerhofer. Next on the grid is Oliver Freimuth, and completing the 5th row of the grid, it will be Hans-Joachim Stuck to go first in the Reiter Run KTM, and the last driver on the grid is Jordan Witt in the distinctive green Lamborghini operated by Toro Verde GT, and that should be a car to come through the order. Jordan went off the road in the qualifying session and hence is at the rear of the grid, but should be able to make some progress. That is Luca Piri. He will give way in the pit stops to Stefan Rattel, and that car going down towards the very tight hairpin of the Spitzkehrer. Can't really call that a steering wheel, can you? It's more of a controller because it's no top, no bottom, but it's the way of things these days.
Yes, it is, and it's actually been quite interesting. This is going to sound really nerdy, to see the evolution of the steering wheel in GT cars, because a lot of them, much like the Mercedes AMG GT3, like you say, it's just 2 handles connecting you to the actual, well, the actual shaft through the middle, effectively.
Exactly, yeah.
But now some of them are starting to rejoin at the bottom again. I mean, BMW, when they brought out the M4 GT3, it's got a very chunky carbon wheel, barely any holes in it for your hands to grab hold of it. But some of them are interchangeable with just incredible electronics. They have like these universal hubs underneath them. And the scary thing about this, obviously Fanatec as part of this series, the M4 GT3 wheel can be used on your sim at home and in the real car. It's the same wheel. Scary.
It is, isn't it? It is. There's Michael Vergers at the wheel of the Porsche, which has kind of got a wheel. There is a connector at the top and the bottom of that. It might be a bit squished, but anyway.
Like a chopping board.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Right, so here they come down towards the stadium. We'll go racing at the end of this lap. And it's been a quick turnaround for the teams, of course, with a pretty condensed timetable. This 2-day event, testing and qualifying yesterday, 2 races today. So, in a sense, if you have got damage from race 1, you really are up against it as the cars now accelerate their way up to the completion of the formation lap. There is Michael Vergers then in the number 5 Porsche, running in that pseudo Martini livery. And 23, Peter Cox, I think, could well be a man to watch, but it also depends, I think, on what the weather gods have in store for us as we get set then ready for the start of this 4th race in the Fanatec GT2 European Series, a new category for this year, the new incarnation of GT2 with rear wings but limited amounts of aero, aimed really at the gentleman drivers, but there are some good experienced pros in the mix as well as the cars now accelerate up towards the timing line. Anders Fjordbach gets very keen with his right foot and blasts away, then he jumps ahead of Bert Langevin as they drop down towards turn 1, and Vergers comes hurtling up the inside line. He bounces over the curb, that forces Langevin out wide. They all run wide over the curb, in fact. Thought for a moment disaster was in the air there, but they've all got through safely. So Anders Fjordbach leads the way on board with Vergers then up the inside line into turn 2. He brakes as late as he dares. He's got the tighter line for 2. It's the outside line for 3. Bert Langevin tries to stay alongside him, but Vergers gets the job done. And this is the view from the Porsche.
And this Porsche as well, really quick in a straight line. We saw the top end of it down here was absolutely unbelievable. Look at that as well in the slipstream, but on its own, it's just got this unbelievable amount of power top end. He stays in the middle of the road to try and cover it off from Fjordbach, who stays down the inside, but he's later on the brakes. Has he gone in too hot? Yes, he has. Have they all gone in too hot? Yes, they have. All of them now scrambling to get back on, as now, the Audi on the right-hand side needs to leave the room there to make sure that Fjordbach can get back on. But this is incredible touring car-style fighting on the first lap, David. Unbelievable stuff.
So Bert Langevin briefly led for a split second, but Fjordbach's gone back ahead of him. Vergers is back up into second place. Langevin third. He's going to get under attack in a minute from Peter Cox with the KTM there, who is right with him. And 5th is kind of everybody else, with Luca Piri at the moment just being able to hang on to the place as they dive down then, heading towards the stadium in a moment to dive into that first element of it, into the Mobile 1 curve. Through the right-hander they come then. And there you can see 2nd, 3rd and 4th. But while Vergers has been busy defending from Bert Langevin, so Anders Fjordbach, the race leader, is trying to get away. Double winners, of course, with the win at Monza, a win at Hockenheim, the crew of the high-class racing Audi. But you can see the way that Vergers was under attack, gets away a little bit, coming up there towards turn 16 into the Sud curve, heading towards the end of the lap. Porsche versus Audi. Fascinating to see where the strengths and weaknesses of either brand lay. And again, look, Fergus, he's bounced way out wide over the curb. Longchamp lines up to have a go. The Audi looks good through the corners. The Porsche looks good with the grunt and go in a straight line.
It does indeed, and you can see the visual differences between these two cars. The Audi is a lot lower, slung a lot wider. The Porsche is quite narrow and tall. It doesn't have the massive diffuser on the rear end like the Audi does. And you've got to think that rear end stability of the Audi is just what helps it stay planted in the corners. But then the Porsche just absolutely disappears in a straight line down the road. It's got some phenomenal grunt on it. As we saw in the first race, it doesn't quite have the initial punch out of the corner, but once you get it up through the gears, that thing's a missile. And look at that, he's closer to Fjordback now than he was actually to Longchamp as he got away.
Michael Berger's being warned about track limits, incidentally, and he closes right up onto the tail of the leader, then down to the Spitzkehrer hairpin. Now, where in all of this is Longchamp? Is he going to be able to make a move in the Audi? Not yet. If anything, he's lost a length or two. Peter Cox falling into the clutches of Luca Piri, and Hans Stuck is up into 6th from 10th on the grid.
Fantastic stuff from Hans Stuck. You never lose it, do you? It's like riding a bike for him. Absolutely epic stuff. But this is phenomenal by Fergus because he's just bouncing between these two Audis. He's under attack from Longchamp, then he goes forward and has a go at Fjordback as well. And I mean, I don't think either of us are very surprised that he got one for track limits after that first lap, but what a phenomenal start to the race. As, oh, that's understeer on, understeer that is, and surely Longchamp's going to close right up to him. But again, the corner's just not where that Porsche lies strong. And this hairpin as well, they've been struggling on the way into here, and well, there's a very, very easy observation to make that the Audi's definitely better there.
But that Porsche is struggling again for traction. You see Fergus is good on his racecraft, great on the brakes, goes back through. Longchamp looks to get the switch back and go to the inside line at turn 17 out of the Sud Curve. He's got the drive off the corner as again, all arms and elbows in a way, is Michael Fergus trying to persuade that car to grip, to bite, to give him the feel, the traction that he needs. He's got the pace in a straight line, but through the corners, and there are 17 of them, that thing is a right handful.
It is indeed, and to be honest, if you haven't seen the racing before, everybody, watch the racing before. When it was in the wet, it was even more lively. I don't think it ever went through shot in a straight line from what we saw, but look, everybody else lining up behind now. You've got Cox, Piri, Stuck, all waiting to make a move, but that Porsche is so exciting to watch. It's dancing around on the surface, but Peter Cox has probably got up to the back of this thinking, flipping heck, what have I got myself involved with here? He's going to be absolutely loving the challenge, though, to get past these two. Now, Longchamp needs to be really on his toes because, I mean, Cox attacking from behind, Berger's in front of him, two unbelievably experienced drivers. He's not got this easy, has he?
Not at all. He's got a whole line of cars queued up. The one beneficiary, this is Anders Fjordback. Now, look, that's a straight. Porsche pulls out the gap. Here's a corner. Audi claws it back in, and Fergus' heart sinks once again. Look, they're all queued up behind him again. Thread your way out of this next section. Short straight. Bit of power. The dragster-esque Porsche then bolts away by another length or two, and then you've got, what, 4 corners all in quick succession. And look, the gap comes right down as Longchamp gets himself under the rear wing of the Porsche once again. Into the stadium they come then in front of those imposing grandstands. Real focal point, this, of the Hockenheim circuit. And look, Longchamp crawling all over the back of Vergers. Cox starting to close as well, taking this car, that of Luca Piri, with him.
Yeah, he's gained a little bit of ground as Piri unstuck there, about 0.7 of a second last time they went through any of the sectors. But now, really good run out the final corner there by Longchamp. Looks to the right-hand side of Vergers, but that Porsche just disappearing up the road. Now into a corner, as you said, David. Audi closes up. This is just an incredible battle of who's going to crack first. This is actually, you have to say, it's kind of down to the cars at this point of the race. Then the drivers need to manage it, see how the tyres are later before they do the driver swaps.
Yeah, and then you also then go into the second stint and work out who's going to be the stronger out of the co-drivers, which is the other fascination about double driver races. So, Michael Vergers it is, trying to keep everybody at bay, trying to master the car. He's busier than a bricklayer in Beirut at the moment, trying to do all of this as he comes down to the hairpin. Then you've got at the moment Fjordback over 4 seconds to the good as he comes into the hairpin. And this is Vergers then hard at work, hunched over the wheel, conscious that if he goes just a millimetre out wide, they're going to pounce.
They're all ready for it, all queuing up, but this is fantastic driving, you have to say, by Vergers so far. But the gap at the front, Fjordback doing similar to what they did in the first race, absolutely clearing off, maybe not to the same extent. I mean, he had over 50 seconds at one point in the first race, and about 40 seconds before the pace car came out, the safety car. But Vergers now 4.2 seconds off the lead. I think his main attention now is going to be, can we finish in second as this thing stands? Because he's certainly opened up a bit of a gap, but even more cars on the back of this now. Jordan Witt and then Lenz in there as well, just trying to stick with them all.
That's right.
Sorry,
so
Stuck and Witt, apologies.
Yeah, Stuck 6th, Witt 7th, Christoph Lenz is in 8th. Klaus Engelhofer is 9th, and Oliver Freimuth, who won his class early on in the day, he's dropped back into 10th place, but there is still a long way to go, 43 minutes yet, with, at the moment, the leading AM being Hans Stuck. How is Hans Stuck an AM, you might say? It's because he's now a little older than a few of them, so he falls into that bronze category by dint of being in his 70s now. Mark Patterson's in his 60s, incidentally, and he will take over the race leading car as they dive down once more into turn 1. So Fjordbach now, fastest lap of the race, 4.8 seconds for the Could, as there Jordan Witt goes out of turn 1, hustling on, drive shaft dramas, damage, spins. Toro Verde GT's had pretty much everything thrown at it over the weekend, but we know that Jordan Witt is quick. He's raced in GT4, he's raced in GT3, indeed was a race winner in the two-season McLaren in the British GT Championship last year. We've seen him in Carrera Cup on and off over the years, so he's an experienced peddler, is Jordan, the Cheshire driver, and goes now down towards the hairpin, still charging along in pursuit of the redoubtable Hans Stuck.
Yes, indeed. You just never know what Stuck's got up his sleeve, and he's right behind Peary now as well. Jordan Witt's just going to be waiting for the door to slightly open a little bit maybe and just say, oh, all right, I'll follow you through there. But it's all a bit of a waiting game at the moment for them. Still pushing and keeping the pace early on. But one of the things that we have to love about this is while we do get, obviously, balance of performance in GT racing, you know, we've always had this mix of front-engine cars, rear-engine cars, different sized engines, naturally aspirated turboed, as we touched on earlier in the other race. Even in this, there's such a difference in certain areas for some of these cars, and they're still so close together, and over a lap, barely any difference. It's great.
Which proves the BOP works.
No.
And that is Longchamp going off the road. Scrabbles back on. That's going to cost him dear, isn't it? He's going to tumble down the order. So Bert Longchamp falls now into 7th place, having got it wrong coming into the stadium. I was about to offer you the fact that Michael Vergers had done the absolute best of anybody in the first sector in the Porsche, and now his task is eased because he doesn't have to think about defending because Longchamp has had a rallycrossy moment. Does he go for the pits? He does. Has he got a big problem then? Is that what put him off the road? Let's see.
I'd argue that there might have been a bit of help from Peter Cox because he got very, very close indeed, but we'll have to see that the rear end of the car looked really unsettled when he came back on, as you'd expect, but it was quite wobbly, let's say. The wing was a bit all over the place. Here's what happened. Oh, it's already gone. The back end steps out and then Cox goes down the inside and says, just go see if the gravel's wet for us, mate. Just try that out there.
I mean, it was heading to the gravel anyway, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Cox was coming through.
Yeah, definitely.
And it was Longchamp's problem, that.
I think they call that a braille pass, don't they? But you can see there the wing vibrating and moving around a hell of a lot. I'm not sure whether that's just the natural movement of the rear wing, but either way, it certainly didn't look planted at the back. Back on board with the unmistakable sound of the Porsche Flat 6. Here is the 81 Audi in the pits then. That's absolutely gutting for them, though, because he had such potential early on, didn't he, David?
Yeah, but I just wonder whether that is in because something was a problem causing it to go out wide rather than any brush with Peter Cox. I suspect it's the former, so there's no real urgency to that pit stop. Something is not right. Now, whether there was any curb dancing early on that we didn't see that's created that, it's a possibility. This, then, is Michael Vergers, who is chipping away now that he's dispensed with all the dramas behind him. He's got to make up 4.6 seconds, but look, suddenly it's a whole different complexion. He's way clear of Cox. 4th is Peary, 5th is Stuck, and 6th is Witt now.
Yeah, now he doesn't have to worry about defending. He's just looking forward and pushing the absolute everything out of that Porsche. It's a very interesting version of the Porsche 911 to see. This is the GT2 RS, which obviously is also the name for one of the road cars as well, which they did. They did the GT2 anyway, didn't they? Yeah. So this is not the usual Cup car that you'd see. It's not the GT3R version. It's a very, very specific GT2 RS, and it looks fantastic. You know, the taller wing like you'd see on the Cup car. Not the chunky arches you'd see on the GT3. It's a bit of a middle ground between them. Bit of work on the wheel there from Jordan Witt, just messing about with some of the settings.
And he's been given a driving standards flag, and so too is Peter Cox. So track limit warnings are coming. So just remember, guys, keep within the white line, says the race director. Jordan Witt's charging on. Fastest lap of the race done by Anders Fjordbach. And he's on another mission because he's just done another absolute best within the first sector of this, the 7th lap of the race. 8 more minutes and we can think about pit stops. So we're rattling through this. It's been a dramatic start. To the inside line looks Jordan Witt, and so nearly comes to grief once again. Tell you what, the brakes work on that Lambo.
They do indeed, and that was almost the second time of the weekend that Lamborghini ended up underneath the back of that KTM there as well. Yeah. His teammate David Fairbrother did it in the first race as well, and he actually did it to Rosenberger, who was Joachim Stuck's teammate, which is actually the leader in the AM class at the moment, isn't it, David? We mentioned earlier that somehow Hans Stuck is classed as an AM, but they lead the class either way. That's the fact.
Absolutely right. Yeah, Hans Stuck then leads the AM class. Second of the AMs is another of the KTMs, number 7, Christoph Lenz. Third is the KTM of Klaus Angerhofer. So the AM class leader, Hans Stuck, in 5th place, the Austrian driver. They're going through is David Fairbrother. And there was contact between 81 Audi and 23 KTM. So Bert Langevin and Peter Cox did make slight contact, and it's being looked at by the stewards, but also we understand from Gemma in the pits that the Langevin Audi's wheel was slightly looser after that little brush, so it might not have been a very big bit of contact, but was enough to do damage. Now, it still looked as though the car was going out wide anyway, but that brush rather seems to have been the nail in the coffin, as it were. Yeah,
a bit of assistance, let's say. Fjordbach has responded as well, by the way, a 1:43.2 on that last lap, fastest lap of the race, 0.7 of a second quicker than Vergas trying to chase him down. So he's seen that Porsche is coming and he has absolutely gone for it. The gap is now 5.8 seconds. It was 4.6 a few laps ago. But we go back on board now with Jordan Witt down the huge parabolica here towards the very tight hairpin. Little flash of the lights there from Hans Stuck, maybe just saying, are you going to brake this time? And Jordan Witt says, yeah, but I'm going to brake later than you. Watch this. Chucks the Lamborghini down the inside. Hans-Joachim Stuck, still, you don't lose it, mate. Back down the inside again, still side by side on the exit. Who's got the firepower down the straight then? And who's got the fruits to chuck it through this right-hander at full chat? Stuck down the inside, holds onto the place for now.
Jordan Witt will fight back on the inside line. He's going to brake late. Stuck sees him coming. He'll go for the undercut, will he? No, he was run out a little bit too wide there. So Jordan Witt does mug him. He does go through, gains the place. But again, you've got the little KTM versus the big Lamborghini in simple terms. Great battle between the two. And Hans Stuck, as you say, Chaz, he's not lost it. Still ever the enthusiast. And a great ambassador for motorsport is Hans Stuck. Really enjoys it no matter what his role. And let's have another look at what happened between Langevin and Cox. Now, look, Langevin's going out wide anyway. Peter Cox arrives. It's not that big a hit for my money, I've got to say, but enough. And whether it was the contact or whether it was the bouncing through the gravel that's done for it, we'll let the team decide. But it was that rub, as I say, that has done damage to the wheel mounting and brought the car into the pits and effectively into retirement, I fear. Yeah,
it's a real shame that for Langevin. Absolutely gutting stuff. The car does continue, but it's not really at any sort of potency to challenge anyone at the moment. There's the number 88 machine, Perry, just going through as we look at Jordan Witt now, of course, ahead of Hans Stuck, but he manages to keep his class lead. To Stuck, they're not in the same class, bit of a drift there from Jordan Witt. Nice styling it out at turn 2.
He's always been good value, Jordan Witt. Sometimes he does step the wrong side of the line, but he's always a spectacular driver. He's a quick driver as well. So one to watch, and his next target, Luca Piri, with only 5 minutes before the pit window opens. Now, in theory, in most cases here, you've got the faster / more experienced driver going first, so you can expect them to go deeper through the pit window.
Yes, yeah, they'll push that and try and eke it out as much as possible. You know, in no disrespectful way to their teammates, but that's why we love this sort of racing. We were talking about it earlier on today, that you get these two drivers of different pace levels. The people that you see now in this race going quicker than others, come the pit stop window, that could be changed completely the other way around, and those gaps will be diminished completely. And we have to think about the extra time in the pit stops as well.
Because the race leading car will gain an extra 10 seconds. The second placed car doesn't gain any extra. So effectively, although the gap is 5 seconds advantage Audi over Porsche, that's going to swing back the other way, given the extra time in the pits.
Yes, Vergas will be very happy knowing that as well. I mean, he's keeping him honest at the moment. The gap did go up to 5.8 seconds. It's now, well, last time it was 5.7, so it's very, very similar, although I say that, and there you go, 6.1. Changes very quickly. It says, no, Chaz, watch this.
Luca Piri, meantime, fourth. And fourth in class as well, another of the Pro-Am entries goes through. Another very, very experienced driver is Luca Piri, going back from many years of GT racing as well as the Euro NASCAR series. And from another angle, now look, the Audi's already had a twitch. It's offline. Cox goes up the inside. He's committed to that line.
Yeah.
So I still think there was something that caused the Audi to either go offline or twitch to go offline in the first place.
Yeah, it sort of had like a 3-stage twitch. It went and he saved it, and then as he thought, oh, right, okay, I've saved that, turned in again, then it did it again. And then as he just got there, it might have just been a bit difficult to judge for him as well. Cox might have seen the way it behaved and thought, oh, well, I'm just going to chuck it down the inside anyway. Don't need to give him the room. But we're just getting in. Oh, we're just getting word in that Peter Cox, 23, is getting a drive-through penalty for causing a collision. Now, I think that's quite harsh, personally.
Yes, I would go along with that. The stewards have looked at it and they decide that there's a penalty that needs to be applied, but for my money, the Audi was offline anyway. However, better brains than ours look at these things and have ruled upon it. And Peter Cox is going to be decidedly unimpressed by that. This is Oliver Freimut having a spin. He was a class winner earlier on in the day, and the Lamborghini keeps away from anything solid, which is good to see.
Nice J-turn as well there,
it was,
actually.
wasn't it? Yes.
It wasn't quite the controlled slide that we saw from Jordan Wirt earlier, unfortunately, but either way, like you said, David, main point is there, he's not hit anything, he can carry on, but it is a shame to see Freimut so far down, actually, after that fantastic solo effort. Don't forget, he's the only guy in the field that is driving the entire race on his own, no driver switch in his pit stop, but yeah, he's way off at the moment, 47 seconds off the lead, some 11 seconds off the number 17 machine ahead of him. It's a very, very contrasting race for him, I'm afraid. As we look now on board with the fantastic, unmistakable noise of the Audi. I believe that's Luca Piri in 4th place at the moment, still battling with the car on the exit. You can just see when they just try and get the power down, the car does want to bite. A lot of the time they stay very, very smooth on the exit, but the thing just kicks you in the back every time you go up the gears and tries to chuck itself sideways. Even with any of the drive aids that these cars can sometimes have, you still get that problem. So it's all down to the driver reading what the car's going to do through the hairpin. You can tell how far he looks over to the right. You can see him almost sort of like tense up, ready for the kick in the back as he moves it out of there, the slingshot. It's amazing. And what a noise as well. Absolutely right. Now, this lead gap still hovering around the 6-second mark, and we are about a minute and change, as you see, from the pit window opening, so it's going to be interesting to see if anybody does bail early. Anders Fjordback, though, still doing a grand job up front, and if the message has got through to Peter Cox, he's not yet responded to serve that drive-through. But there you got the race leader, Anders Fjordback. Now, he's a bit quicker than Mark Patterson, so again, you can anticipate him to stay out that a little bit longer. Race leader, though, doing an amazing job so far, as they did in the first one. You know, they just look a little bit untouchable at the moment, to be honest, but we all know how that can change. There is the gap, then, between the two of them. The Porsche in the background just lingering in his mirrors, it has to be said. He'll be hoping that eventually it goes away, but Fjordback hasn't put a foot wrong, really, so far, and there you go. That's the difference between his personal best and, of course, the best lap of the race. Sorry, his last lap of the race and his best lap of the race. Fergus a little bit quicker last time, but while the gap has stayed similar, there's not been a single lap really where he's taken a massive chunk out of it, to be honest. And then the gap back to Cox from Fergus is similar. He's just done his drive-through penalty as well, I believe, as Peter Cox. Just saw that's on the time and he came up there. So that means now that Piri has moved up into 3rd place. You can hear the Audi just lighting up the rears on the exit there. Not much of a slide out of it, but it certainly put the power down well, as the 5.2 litre V10 powers it around. So Peter Cox gets the drive-through out of the way, and of course there's that regulation stop they all will have to make. The window is open, but as yet, no takers. No, indeed. He's now down to 6th place, actually, now the timing updated. He has lost places to Witt and Stuck as well. So Peter Cox then in 6th spot, but Rupert Atzberger, we saw in the first race, was quick, so it's not to say the car is necessarily out of the equation. It might not be a winner, but it's not done for totally. There you've got 33, then this is Anders Fjordback building that lead, bearing in mind he's got an extra 10 seconds to serve in the pit, so he wants to stay out for as long as he can and build that gap. And of course there's also the tipping point where if he stays out longer than Vergas, he'll be gaining more because his pace will be much better than Rustica, who will take over the Porsche. Yes, indeed. And another kick in the teeth to the 23 machine after that drive-through is that they've got 7 seconds to add on in the pits as well. Yes, that's right. So they have another disadvantage there. Obviously, the 81 machine, 5 seconds added onto their stop. They're already down at the bottom end of the field. So some of them having what's known as a character-building afternoon in this second race, I think you could say. So there you've got the race-leading car heading up towards the Spitzkehrer once more. This is lap 13. Lead gap 6.5 seconds. And right now, Anders Fjordback is about the only lonely person really in the race, having seen off the opposition early on. He's building that gap, but fair play to Michael Vergas. He's keeping him within striking distance. And so you fast forward into
whatever time we have between Rustica and Patterson, who will take over these two cars, and the battle continues in that second stint.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how it all pans out after the pit stop. And to be fair, if either of them stay out for a couple of laps more, like we've said, just pushing that pit window as much as they can and leaving the stop as late as possible, it's just going to be the tiny little intricacies of a tenth of a second here or there just helping them set up that final stint of the race. And I don't really know exactly how it's going to go yet. I don't really want to try and call it either, because there's just so much to factor into this. There could be an issue at the pit stop, could go over on the time, but you never know really, do you? So we've got the Porsche just going through the final couple of corners now. Just going to try and see ahead whether the Audi manages to go in, but I think you're right, David. I think it will be out for quite a while yet.
So Verga's maximising his time behind the wheel, rattles it over the curb. Actually, now that he doesn't have to fend off the traffic, the car's looking a bit more stable. Now, that might be because he's able to clearly adjust his style and get into a rhythm. Maybe, and we saw this with Rustica in the first part of the first race, it just takes longer to get this up to temperature and make it be a stable car. It's interesting to see how the Porsche changes as a beast as the race wears on, but it doesn't look as nervous, it doesn't look as much of a handful as it did early in the race.
Yeah, I mean, especially on the brakes as well. The back end was stepping out so much in that earlier race, and it sort of harks back to the Porsche Cup cars that, of course, we've seen a lot of over the last few years, especially, where they've got this really bouncy nature to them on circuit. You get on a curb or on the exit of a corner, and the car just seems to wobble its way out of a corner, but while still putting the foot down really well. Now here is Hans Stuck coming into the pits now, and we get the spaceship-like reveal. You almost sort of expect steam to come out of it when it does that, doesn't it, really?
Lots of blue lights or something,
yeah, tonight, Matthew.
Yes.
But Hans Stuck just getting out then. Obviously, they do have a set time for a lot of these pit stops, so he doesn't have to hurry too much, just as long as it's done within that time. And the number 7 in there as well with Lenz at the wheel.
So that's number 7 KTM, 2 seconds less, because it was third, not second. So an extra 7 seconds for Stuck, who now gives way to his co-driver Chris Rosenberger, and Christoph Lenz gives way to Christoph Ulrich, who had a spin or 2 spins in fact in the first race. But that car will have a slightly shorter pit stop. They're probably going to, given the gap between them when they came in, they'll pretty much leave together, I think. As here, Anders Fjordbach carries on for another lap. He's going to run this right up to the edge of the window, I guess, in order to maximise the time he's got in the car.
And then Patterson's going to get in and wring its neck till the very end and see what he can do to either catch or stay in front of that Porsche, depending on how that window goes. But I think it's going to be him looking at the back of a Porsche as things stand at the moment. The gap is increasing slightly, but it's only 7.5 seconds at the moment. Don't forget, just to remind you, this Audi has to sit there for an extra 10 seconds in the pits, which is going to be the longest 10 seconds you can imagine. It always is when you're in the pits in motorsport, isn't it? You're running around doing 140 mile an hour around here, and then suddenly doing 60.
And there, back on track, and with the front bodywork needing to be closed, Chris Rosenberger, just thinking about that gap, it's gone up to nearly 8 seconds. Maybe, although we're saying that the Porsche looks more stable, maybe having to go at a slightly reduced pace, that's why it's looking stable, because certainly the gap is opening up. So now this is 24. It's just rejoined the race. Chris Rosenberger at the helm of it, the rally driver, and as he brakes, the bodywork lurches forward as they wasn't put on the catches properly, so he has to slow, and down it comes.
Now, what I'm thinking I'm not sure whether I saw that correctly, but the clips for that are on the outside of that bodywork.
So it could happen again.
So it could happen again, but not only that, but he's going to probably have to hold that down every time he goes onto the brakes.
That could be due another pit stop, is what we're saying.
Yeah, I was going to say, either that or he needs to get his get some money together for a big laundry bill.
Yes.
But
well, the air conditioning is effective, but there's nothing else. Now, number 9 has a 4th track limit infringement. This is Jordan Witt, and therefore there is a 5-second penalty to be added to the time, not to the pit stop, but to the race time. So Jordan Witt, running 4th on the road at the moment, is being given a 5-second penalty for abuse of track limits. There's confirmation.
Well, he said before he was excited and he sometimes steps over the line. This time he's literally driven on the outside of the line and unfortunately got himself 5 seconds added on. Now, we saw in the earlier race that there was quite a gap between some of them in the midfield, so he may be able to open up that gap. We will see. Into the pits then comes Luca Piri in the number 88 Audi. You can see him already getting prepared to stop the car and get out as quickly as possible.
Stefan Rattel will take over. First gear down the pit lane. See all the lights are flashing. There is Stefan, who will run around the car, jump in. And Mr. GT Racing, who's done so much to create regulations, to promote events, you name it, steps on board. Another of his championships kicks into life next weekend. British GT kicks into life at Brands Hatch. But Stefan Rattel then is behind the wheel now of his Audi 88 that he shares with Luca Piri. And that's another of the Pro-Am class cars that's going to blast back into the race very shortly. As, in the meantime, we have more shuffling down the order there. Number 17 KTM goes through. That's Klaus Angerhofer, who has taken over the lead for the moment of the AM class. But of course, when he pits to give way to Hubert Trunkenpolz, so that advantage could well shift back to the Hans Stuck and Chris Rosenberger car. It's still being shown as Stuck on the screen, but it should now be Rosenberger behind the wheel, unless for some reason Hans Stuck, no, we saw him get out, didn't we? I was going to say decided to carry on, but no, we saw Stucky get out. So it is definitely Chris Rosenberger at the wheel, yes. That's
probably why the lid came up. It was still him just saying, "Hi guys, I'm still here." You know how much of a showman he is. He'd probably, to be fair, knowing if you said to Stuck, "Do you want to drive it with the pretty much with the roof off for a lap?" He'd go, "Yeah, all right, why not?" But either way, hopefully they've sorted that issue. As into the pits then comes Fergus.
Yeah, from second place then. So the gap had actually got up to 12 seconds. That said, of course, it's always a slow in lap because of the speed limit. So the gap's a little bit of an artificial one, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the second stint now, which, as you can see, is going to last for just over 20 minutes. And actually, Fjordbach has left this really late. He's going to be absolutely on the wire, isn't he, when he comes in?
I was going to say, because it's obviously down to 20 minutes of the race left to go when he can round out that pit window. So he's got, well, I suppose if he started the lap, it's just under 2 minutes, obviously. 1 minute 43 is about the lap time we see. There's Jordan Witt bringing in the number 9 Lamborghini. That's the Super Trofeo GT2.
That's his stint over. That's Witt's end. So he will get out. In will get David Fairbrother. The old ones are the best. Also in, again, Peter Cox. Also in is Klaus Angerhofer. So pretty much everybody now, bar the race leader, serving the stops. Now remember, Fergus doesn't, or now Rustica, doesn't have to serve any extra time in the pits. That is the stint done for Michael Fergus. Aurelius Rustica waits for the team to count him down. They'll have to factor in how long the drive time is from there down to the end of the pit lane. And away goes Aurelius Rustica now.
Porsche making the very distinct sound all the way down. And so here's the 33 on the back of the 88, and into the pits he comes with barely 30 seconds left to go to the pit window. That's a really good call, to be fair. He's done that to perfection. And obviously that counts when he hits this white line, which is now. So 26 seconds left to go, I'd say, is about the official figure. That's
pretty decent timing, that, isn't it? So in will come Fjordbach to give way to Mark Patterson, the South African driver. Another very, very experienced driver is Mark. We've seen a lot of him in Europe, but also in the States over the years. More drivers getting ready to jump on board, as you see, but this is the last of the cars in for a pit stop. And at the end of the next lap, we're going to see the true order between Patterson and Rustica. There is the very tall South African who will replace the Dane. Out gets Fjordbach. And Mark Patterson will fold himself up, put himself behind the wheel of the Audi.
Take the booster seat out.
Yeah, that's it. Mind your own. In he gets. And all of these, because they're done to a time, less frantic, so the gentleman racers can make sure they're comfortable in the car. Now, Aurelius Rustica here could come over the line as the race leader. Let's see, because he's about to accelerate down towards the stadium. There you've got Mark Patterson getting comfortable behind the wheel, and as Fjordbach has done the best lap of the race in that car.
It's probably a bit safer in terms of pit stops as well, isn't it? Not to have people sort of running frantically around the car. It's definitely a good thing to have, but it's intriguing to see where this Porsche does end up, though. We've got Longean in the pits as well in one of the other Audis, number 81.
Right, so there is the car now. Mark Patterson, the 69-year-old, is good to go, but Aurelius Rustica is on his way. Now, don't forget, oh, hello, what's he done? And the team said stop. If they have said stop, that's going to be a problem, because you shouldn't leave your pit box and then stop on the pit lane. So that might get looked at, but maybe they released him too early and then realised the mistake and said, no, wait. But the stewards might look at that. Mark Patterson left and then certainly stopped. He wasn't in the fast lane, he was in the working lane. He keeps the lead over Rustica, but the stewards may have a look at that for the release. Let's see. And don't forget as well, he's got to get himself up to speed here, whereas Rustica is a lap into his stint. So it's advantage Porsche if Rustica can absolutely throw everything at this on this lap.
So this is now the second race in a row where this Audi has got a penalty lingering over it before the closing stages of the race.
Well, possibly so. It might get looked at. I mean, the investigation in race 1 turned out to be nothing because the teams were given the benefit of the doubt of the tyre change, but the regulation has been tightened from here on in. But Aurelius Rustica is charging along, but we know how good that Audi is. So just give Mark Patterson a lap to get himself sorted. He might be hard to stop, but equally the stewards may have a look at that release, as I say.
Yeah, indeed. We'll leave that up to them. We can only wonder. But yeah, this is very interesting now as the Porsche closes in. Rustica was so impressive at the start of the first race in the wet conditions earlier. You see it there, just the bounce of this Porsche over the curbs. They're so lively. They've got amazing body language about them when they're chucked around on track into what David called the Old Faithful stadium section earlier today. Atzberger 5th at the moment after 2 pit stops as well. And the number 23 KTM, still going pretty well, to be honest. That's the Reiter Engineering machine, teammates with Peter Cox. Obviously it says 2 pit stops because of their drive-through, which is what's dropped them a bit further down. Now that Porsche there, to me, looked a bit more lively. There was a lot more work going on behind the wheel mid-corner there for Rustica. The gap as they cross the line is 3.4 seconds. So while it is closer than it was before the pit stops, it's not anywhere near what we expected it to be. We thought it would be a few seconds at least to the advantage of the Porsche.
Well, indeed. I mean, don't forget the Audi had that extra 10 seconds anyway. Maybe it was that caused the team to shout stop, but I'm still not really sure that they should have released the car and then stop it. So, again, we might be getting ahead of ourselves here. However, right now, Mark Patterson leads from Aurelius Rustica. The gap when they went over the line was 3.5 seconds, give or take a few thousandths, and there they are. And now, what can Rustica do? The Porsche charging on, and after a good first stint by Michael Vergers, Aurelius Rustica, who's another experienced driver, lots of long-distance races under his belt, chases on, but can he bring down the gap in 16 minutes of the race?
We wait and see. Not the best of races for the KTM so far. The highest place of them, 5th at the moment, despite them being the most well-represented car in the field. They are all together, though. They hunt in packs, they say. It's actually close between 7th and 8th as well. Trunkenpolz and Ulrich were only 0.2 of a second apart last time that they triggered any of the timing beams. Next gap back from that's the closest, is between Rosenberger and Atzberger, which was 2.4 seconds. Rosenberger getting past Atzberger on the previous lap. So it's all going what we'll call the KTM field.
Yes, exactly. It's sort of one-mate race within a race.
Yeah.
So right now, there is the KTM battle. So that is now Christoph Ulrich getting himself up past Hubert Trunkenpolz.
You can see even the bodywork on the number 7 there at the front seems to be lifted up slightly in front of the windscreen, but I remember seeing similar in the first race as well. Whether that's as a result of the contact it made with the wall, it wasn't that car, ignore me, but it was the 7 that had the early spin.
Correct.
In the race, wasn't it?
23 was the wall banger.
Yes,
from earlier on. And Rupert Atzberger had his spin, and he has now taken over from Peter Cox in the delayed number 23. So Ulrich is on a mission, as you see. He's caught and passed Trunkenpolz and now getting away. And Oliver Freimuth is still struggling, the AM winner from race 1. That Lamborghini has never come alive. It had that spin, admittedly, but it's never really been part of the battle, has it? No, it was absolutely on it from the get-go in the first race, albeit a bit of contact here and there, but he was getting his elbows out, he was pushing forward, making moves, and then since then, there's just not been that same fight in him for this second race. It's almost like he said, right, boys, I've got my silverware to take home for the weekend. You just have a fun race in the second one, and I'll leave it here. But obviously, that's not going to be the case, really. Now, we've just got a report that Gemma is going to be having a quick word with Anders Fjordbach, of course, teammate of our race leader, as we see here, Mark Patterson.
Yeah, absolutely. Anders, obviously, you've just done your stint. Fantastic drive from you there. And at the beginning, certainly it wasn't easy.
No, it certainly wasn't. A bit wet patches, and we don't have any tire heaters here in this area, so we all start on ice-cold tires in the damp. Some would say it's a little dangerous, but we did what we had to do.
And then, of course, we've just seen Mark take over, pulled away from the garage and then stopped. Is that simply because of the pit stop timing?
I think he was a little unsure, so he took the cautious way. it was perfect. So we lost a bit of time, but better safe than sorry.
Absolutely, and he's certainly keeping it out front now.
Yeah, I hope so. I didn't have much time to follow it, but it looks good for now.
I'll let you get back to it. Thanks a lot,
Thank
Anders.
you. All right, see ya.
Aurelius Rustica Porsche is also being reported to the stewards for another track limits offence.
Oh no.
So it's the car, not individual drivers. Now, in the battle here between David Fairbrother and Chris Rosenberger, you've got the Pro-Am Lamborghini ahead of the AM KTM, and 24 KTM is back into the lead of the class.
Yes, indeed. They've managed to get back up in front, obviously after the pit stops put them out of sync earlier on, and now having to go at one of the Pro-Am cars as well. And if you're going to chase any car in the field, it's not really a bad car to look at the back of, is it, the Lamborghini? As he looks down the inside into turn 2, hard onto the brakes. And
now the Porsche that we've just been talking about being reported to the stewards, they've now copped 5 seconds. So the stewards have looked at it, 4 track limit warnings from the race director. That then goes to the stewards and Bosch, 5 seconds. So that gives the advantage back to the Audi again, doesn't it? The gap was already up to 7 seconds, plus another 5, and Rustica falls back. You've got to say that it's a shame for him, because some of them have been done by his co-driver, but it's a team effort.
Well, yeah, that's it. At the end of the day, I mean, we were talking earlier about how when you're the second driver watching what the first driver's doing, you're wondering how difficult is he going to make it for me? How easy is he going to make it for me? And unfortunately, as they work together on this, track limits offences have managed to add up, and it's 5 seconds for car 5. And if we went off numbering them for how many seconds they got, I wouldn't want to be driving the 88 machine, I'll tell you that.
No, indeed not. So that's number 9 and the Lamborghini, and also then number 5 Porsche, with 5-second penalties to be added on at the end. And so Mark Patterson is quietly getting on with the job, accelerating away, way up the curb there, look, coming into the stadium. But the hard-charging David Fairbrother is now behind the KTM. And this is Chris Rosenberger, as I say, leading the AM. So he's carrying on the good work from Hans Stuck. Chris Rosenberger, whose background is in rallying, but has done, like many of them, quite a bit of KTM racing in the mainland European crossbow battle, and then into the GT2 series this year with these much faster, much more powerful cars built to the new GT2 regulation. You might think KTM's a rather odd manufacturer to have in this, but they've been big supporters of GT racing, things like the Super Sport class within GT4 and these cars, as well as making their own cars for One Make Championship. So you kind of forget how long they've been building cars. You still think of them as bikes, but they've got a good pedigree in cars.
Yeah, definitely a good pedigree indeed. And, you know, it shows it's a very, very potent car. And I must admit, when I first saw them on the grid, I thought, what the heck is that thing? Yeah. And when you see the road car of a KTM Crossbow, you compare it to this, it looks like a completely different machine, but they're based on the same chassis. It's just absolutely amazing, really. But either way, it's certainly a lot prettier than the normal Crossbow on the road. But you mentioned the GT4s as well that they make, and that in itself, while it does look like an Amazon parcel with wheels, that thing is a very, very good car. A very loud one as well, I've found out.
And very light as well, which is why they were so good. I mean, the early days of GT4, that Super Sport class, it's from there that the likes of Christopher Haase came out of with a KTM, and taking on Ginetta, which you could argue is another low-volume producer, but they kept that category alive for a while. So there you've got then Chris Rosenberger, who is running 4th overall. Now that's not a bad effort, and his last lap was a 48.5, which, whisper it, is slightly quicker than Stefan Rattal up the road. However, there's a margin of about 20 seconds between them, so I'm not suggesting the KTM is going to catch, but it's interesting to see the pace of that car now.
And especially as they started 10th and second to last on the grid as well. They were really on the back foot, but they've made fantastic progress so far to lead their class as well. A really strong effort. There's the number 23 Reiter Engineering machine. Peter Cox racing this car earlier, but now it's at the hands of Rupert Atzberger, as you see there.
And because of the drive-through penalty that Peter Cox copped, so that car has fallen now down into 6th place, with the hard-charging, make that 7th place now, the hard-charging Christoph Ulrich there, having just gone through ahead. So Ulrich gains ground. In the background is Hubert Trunkenpoltz coming off the Sudkurve, turn 17. And all of a sudden, we've got to just under 9 minutes to go in another lively race.
I was going to say, when people say it's a 50-minute race with 10 cars, you think it might last a bit longer than that. to say it politely. But it does fly by. I mean, we were saying again after the first race earlier that you don't need that many cars to have a great race, and it certainly showed. And we've got the same again here, because while they're not directly battling with each other door to door on track, we've got the really intriguing battle of just the lap times and them all closing in on one another and trying to picture what could happen at the end of the race. It's very, very interesting.
As there, Christoph Ulrich runs out wide. It is, for me, one of the joys of double driver long distance racing, whether they're mini enduros like this at 50 minutes or 24 hours. I mean, you can have so much offered up, you know, whether it's different drivers' pace, whether it's how different cars work, whether it's the conditions, whether it's what penalties will do. You know, there's so much in a long race, and particularly with two drivers, it always adds something. Now, how's Stefan Rattel getting on? He's in third place here. A study of concentration at a different desk, coming up then over the timing line, and he's chasing after Aurelius Rustica. Now, he is 6 seconds back and 4/10 quicker. He's going to close, but he's not going to catch before the end, is he?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. But he could be happy with holding on to third place at the end of the day. Number 88 doing a smashing job at the moment. You can see, like you said there, David, he is catching bit by bit. Best lap as well for Rustica last time round. It was their personal best, but still, Rattel able to match that and some.
He'll inherit second place because of the penalty. He won't catch him, but he will inherit second position when you add the 5 seconds on to, or he should inherit second if he carries on at this pace. So he can get within 5 seconds and then inherit second position after the race, but I don't think he's going to get there in time. Now, there's another one under investigation for speeding in the pit lane. Oh dear, it's the Peter Cox, Rupert Atzberger, KTM, to throw something else at them for the day.
Oh, any more salt to rub in that wound, boys?
Exactly,
honestly, that's again, I'll use the phrase character building. That was not what they wanted to see right now, but at the end of the day, the rules are the rules, and as we said about when Rattel managed to get a lot of the, what was it, the behavioural warning points.
That's right, yes.
He held his hands up, and it's not broadcastable what he said, but he messed up, let's just say. He knew it, and there's no favouritism or anything like that. Everyone sticks to the rules. Indeed. Everyone has the same set of them, and it's penalties for people that get them wrong.
Yes, pit lane speeding, crossing the pit exit white line, all cops, behavioural warning points, and there's a totting up process that then gets you a grid drop, and there's going to be another drive-through penalty, the second of the race, for speeding in the pit lane for 23. Whether it was Cox speeding in, Atzberger speeding out, doesn't really matter. Point is, the car cops the penalty.
Yeah, that's for them to point fingers at each other in the team meeting afterwards. But it's a real shame, though. It's just a tiny little detail like that can put pay to what could have been an amazing performance in terms of the pace. I mean, they've still got the pace while they're out there. It's just that when it comes to the timing sheets at the end of the day, it doesn't quite reflect what they could have had the potential for, really.
It's also going to jumble the result yet again, isn't it? Because that car is going to fall out of 7th place as we've got 5.5 minutes still on the clock. Weather conditions getting better and better again now, which probably means we're due another deluge of rain shortly. As out of the Sundkurve again comes number 7, Christoph Ulrich, still pressing on well, and behind is David Fairbrother. So 5th and 6th those two are, with another place gained by the Sportec Motorsport KTM out of the AM class. And Ulrich is second. Now, he's got to make up 15 seconds in 5 minutes. That's not going to happen, is it?
No, not without an incident for Rosenberger. And at the end of the day, it's still second in class. They can still be very happy with that. Because, let's face it, it looked so promising in that first race for them. But the spin out of second place very nearly got collected as well by one of the other KTMs. As he came back across the track, it was a very scary moment. But here is your overall race leader, Mark Patterson. I'll never get bored of listening to that Audi accelerate out of there.
It's amazing, isn't it, how different the GT2 Audi R8 looks from a GT3. You look at the front and you think, oh yeah, and then the more you look at the car, the more different it gets.
Yeah.
And look at that rear wing. We talk about the relative lack of aero they have. It's almost as though it's just there for effect. And you see how it moves around a lot, certainly in those last few corners, how with the bumps in the road, that rear wing was really rattling around. 4 minutes on the clock.
I remember a while ago when, I believe it was when Jaguar made their first XKR GT car. It was a GT2 machine. They tried, oh, there we go, that's the 81 down the inside of the 28. They were saying, Chaz, this story's going to be boring. Watch this. So the number 81 chucks it down the inside. That is for 9th place. So Freimuth just not able to get on with it. Whether the car's got a problem or something, I'm not sure, but there's been a severe drop-off in pace, hasn't there?
There has. It's just not been there all race, has it? So Oliver Freimuth down to 9th. Up to 8th is Peter Gellings, who wanted rain for his stint. But, of course, that car badly delayed early on. So it's effectively a lap down on the race leader after pitting for repairs. Race control giving Peter Cox that drive-through for his part in that incident. And there, in the background, Aurelius Rustica falling away markedly now from Mark Patterson. And the gap between Rustica and Rattel, 4.8 seconds. So that's the tipping point now. Stefan Rattel will indeed inherit second place.
Yes.
On the amended result with that penalty to Aurelius Rustica.
And it's going to be quite a nice position to be in for him now, because even though he knows he's still catching, he just has to stay in that 5-second window. He doesn't have to overtake him on track, put the extra work in, put the actual extra pressure on the tyres just to do that. You know, he could just very happily sit behind him till the end of the race now and then gain that position. So fair play to Rattel. He's got on with the job as soon as he's come out, and he's going to reap the rewards if the race stays this way.
Rupert Atzberger in 23 KTM has done the drive-through, so that puts that car down into last place. A far cry from finishing second in race one, but it's been a catalogue of dramas. 2 drive-throughs for them today.
And just coming back to Freimet as well, like you say, the contrast, because in his first race in the championship, he won his class, and then he goes to finishing right near the back of the order in the second one. So he's had the best of it in one race and the worst of it in the other one, really, although I suppose not DNF. Yeah,
Rupert Atzberger and Peter Cox were up before the officials at Monza, because having nominated which driver would do which qualifying session, they didn't tell the drivers. So the wrong driver went out in the wrong session, and therefore times were disallowed and they were put to the back of the grid, and that rather antagonised Rupert Atzberger, who decided, well, I'll go home now.
Yeah.
So rather than charge up from the back of the grid, we lost that car, which was a shame, but they've proved their pace. And, it's a real shame they've had all the penalties. Right, there is Rattel, closing on Rustica. He might actually catch him before the very end, you know, because he's brought the gap down to 2.8 seconds. Now that Stefan can see the Porsche, he is absolutely flying. Of course, he's had to convince some of the brands to build cars to these GT2 regulations, but his Audi is charging along behind the Porsche and closing fast.
Yeah, it might make Porsche think, oh, we need to make it a bit quicker. Either way, it's almost like as soon as that car, the Porsche, gets anything in visual range of that rear view mirror, it just starts to slowly fall away a little bit. But it's certainly been interesting to watch the pace difference between these two. But Rattel doing a smashing job now. We've got a minute and a half and, well, less left now. So we'll have another lap after this one.
Yeah, just one more lap. So there is Rattel inching up onto the back of Rustica. Flag at the end of the next lap. This is Stefan's view. You can see the concentration now as he homes in on the Porsche ahead of him, which has got this penalty. So even if he doesn't catch, he'll still inherit the place. But whether Stefan knows of a penalty remains to be seen. There he is, into the stadium. The race leader, Mark Patterson, then is about to come across the line. He's 9 seconds ahead of Rustica. He's 12 ahead of Rattel. So Stefan is going to be on the podium, receiving rather than presenting trophies. And he hustles up towards the timing line. Right, Mark Patterson starts the last lap of the race then, looking for 2 out of 2 here and a 3rd victory of the season. Right now, that is very much the high-class racing effort, the benchmark car, team, driver combination.
And what we were talking about before, about the strengths and weaknesses of that Porsche versus the Audi, we had the graphic saying that the gap had gone down from 2.7 seconds in the first sector to then 2 seconds, and then back up again now to, sorry, other way around. It's gone from about 2, it went up to 2.8 and then back down to 2 again, because the Porsche, just on that parabolic bit alone and the punch out of the hairpin, has the straight line speed to get away. In the middle of the lap, it's brilliant, but everywhere else, unfortunately, the Audi's got the legs on it.
It'll be interesting at Silverstone, won't it? Because you've got good, long, fast straights at Silverstone, but you've also got the stadium at the end of the lap, which is perhaps less 911 friendly on the evidence of here. So it's going to be interesting again to see what the pace of the car is like there. Here then is Mark Patterson. It's going to be, as I say, 3 out of 4 for high-class racing for Mark Patterson, for Anders Fjordbach, who did another standout job in the first stint and who can really rival them on this current evidence, even with an extra 10 seconds in the pits. It doesn't seem to faze them. So that car comes down towards the stadium then for the last time. Mark Patterson driving within himself, making sure he doesn't make any errors and concentrating on this Gentleman's Series in Europe this year. The Fanatec GT2 European Series. He comes then into the Sudkurve, that double apex right into the first element, lets the car drift out to the curb, lines up for the clipping point for the second part of the corner here, and up towards the checkered flag. It's going to be a 3rd win of the season then for high-class racing. Mark Patterson takes the checkered flag. He and Anders Fjordbach make it 2 out of 2 at Hockenheim. Win number 3 out of 4 races, and a great effort as Aurelius Rustica will take 2nd on the road, but Stefan Rattel will inherit 2nd place with Luca Piri there as he comes across the line in the Audi. So Rustica and Ferguson will be third in the Porsche. And then for fourth place, it should be the winning AM, Chris Rosenberger and Hans Stuck, there in the KTM over the timing line. And the second of the AMs will be the Christophs, Lenz and Ulrich, who will be through behind in number 7 KTM, and third in the class should be Hubert Trunkenpolz and Klaus Angerhofer, who will be third, as I say.
Fantastic drive that, though, by the 24. They'd start 10th on the grid. You could argue there's not many cars for them to get past, but either way, they still had to do the job. And it was a very, very consistent drive from Stuck early on, and then Rosenberger just carried on that pace. You know, he didn't let off the gas at all. He didn't sit there and think, oh, well, you know, we've got the AM win here, boys. He just carried on, pushing and pushing and pushing. But Patterson did a great job there, didn't he, David? We did expect a bit of a pace difference between him and Rustica. You could say that the penalty put the race to bed for the Porsche, but either way, he could have tried to still catch up and get the race lead, but it just didn't quite have the pace in the end.
Yeah, I mean, that Porsche is a fascinating car. I'm looking forward to talking to Michael Ferguson about it next weekend, because it just seems to have, as we've been identifying, really strong suits and areas where it just struggles. Yeah. Maybe the mixed conditions are part of that, but you know, it's just proved in that race that at certain elements it's been really quick. Now, Aurelius Rustica is perhaps less experienced, certainly of Hockenheim, and hasn't been racing for a while in this sort of car, but even Michael Vergers couldn't sort of tame the beast early on when it was a damp circuit, could he?
No, well, that's it. You know, it did look so lively, even on the brakes. And the thing is, it can often come down to drivers when you're getting on the power out of a corner, and that's how you control it. But when you're on the brakes, you've not really got many options other than slow it down and make sure that you just get it slowed down, and that's it. So to have that Porsche dancing around like that, it really can take the confidence away from you, especially when you've then got to get on the power out of something like a hairpin. So, yeah, it was an entertaining watch all the same, though, that Porsche. The whole race, to be fair, fantastic stuff.
The AM winning KTM is under investigation for a pit stop infringement.
Oh,
so
no.
Hans Stuck and Klaus Rosenberger being looked at. There's confirmation on the screens. And as the winning cars come down the pit lane, that story might rumble on a little bit. So it was with one extra person involved in the pit stop, a mechanic working on the car, I understand, when the car restarted, when the engine fired up. So mechanics should be away from the car, not touching it.
And let's not forget, that was the car that let's say the lid came off, effectively. Maybe something to do with that.
Trying to anchor it down.
Yeah.
That
could be linked. Could not, but you never know. We've got to speculate.
Michael Vergers there apologising to Aurelius Rustica, saying, we're third, we've got a few drive-throughs totted up here, sorry. But in those conditions, in that car that didn't seem to want to stay on the racing line, it's perhaps inevitable. But Mark Patterson, with his patriotic South African colours on the helmet, and there, Anders Fjordback, very, very happy with another victory. Great effort, that.
Yeah, fantastic effort. Now, in the first race, obviously, they had a bit more lingering over them, but that just seemed like such a confident drive from the pair of them. They were really flying all the way through. And we have Gemma down there in the pit lane with our race wins.
Anders Markson, simply a superb weekend. That says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah. Howdy, man. Is this yours? Oh, yeah, sorry.
It's got to keep changing the miles. And it's just while Mark gets himself ready there, a quick word from you for the end of the race there. I mean, it's a super weekend.
Yes, super weekend. We topped the recession.
Yeah, it's amazing, huh?
Mark and I, we've never been here before. We are so surprised also, but we're so happy.
What a classic racetrack. This is a fantastic, challenging racetrack. And so he talked me out of what I was going to do, and he made me play chicken. He made me take it easy, and then we managed to win anyway.
Well, certainly a fantastic result. Well done, and you clearly loved every second.
Oh, it's beautiful. You should try it.
I'd love to. Let's go across to our second place drivers over here. Stefan Rattel, of course, and Luca Piri. Just jump on straight in there if I can get my cameraman through. Brownie, stick with me. Stefan, fantastic result, second place. I know there was a penalty involved in that, but still, you were pushing so hard.
I had a great time. As you can see from the scars on the car, the weekend didn't start that well, but it's finishing better than it started, so we're very happy. And these GT2 cars are really so fun to drive. Exactly what I wanted when we created GT2. You know, lots of power, not much downforce, easy to control, a lot of fun. I'm sure this grid, which is still too small, will grow rapidly.
I'm sure
Next year
it
will be a major series.
I'm sure it will. Let's just grab a quick word from Luca, of course, as well. We saw you celebrating as Stefan came in. You did the hard work in the first start of the race.
Yes, Stefan did an amazing second part of the race, really gaining positions and time. I just tried to be conservative and be with the leading pack. It was a little bit of a hot first and second laps, but then we kept a good pace, and very happy with the second place, and we all see you in
Misano. Next
Misano,
event has
indeed.
been moved from Silverstone to Misano,
Italy.
so we'll be on the warm coast of Italy.
Maybe a dry race for once. Thank you very much. Congratulations again to both of you. Let's just walk across this way as well and see if we can just grab our third place drivers. Sorry guys, just squeezing through, bringing my cameraman with me. Fantastic drive. Disappointing there though to get that 5-second penalty.
Well, no, well, sorry.
You drive.
No, because at the end of the day, I used all the track limits at the beginning to stay ahead, which you know resulted us in getting on the podium in the end. And then unfortunately, Aurelius has driven a stunning weekend, first time here, also in the wet, and then he just used one track limit too many, and that was the penalty. But we take it, you know, we're really happy, and I'm sure Aurelius has got one or two words to say.
I was very happy as well, you know. First time in the Hockenheim, in the wet condition, dry condition, the big race, the nice people, everything perfect.
Well done to both of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Back to our commentators.
Thanks, Gemma. That's British GT Championship Driving Standards Advisor Michael Fergus using up the track limits, is it? I see. Michael, you're not going to live this down next week, you know, when you stand up there in front of a British GT entry. We'll whisper all of this for the moment. So, yes, what Stefan Rattel has just explained about moving the race from Silverstone to Misano, that I think we can put under the breaking news tag. We didn't know that, so a change to the calendar that he's just announced. So Misano rather than Silverstone a week later. Anyway, an excellent race, again, from the Fanatec GT2 European Series. Another win, third of the season for Mark Patterson and Anders Fjordbach from Luca Piri and Stefan Rattel, and then in third place, the Porsche number 5 in the hands of Aurelius Rustica and Michael Vergers. Fjordbach, Patterson the winners, Piri, Rattel second, Rustica, Vergers third. Fourth, but under investigation for a pit stop infringement, the AM winners, Chris Rosenberger and Hans Stuck. Fifth and second in class, Christophs, Ulrich and Lentz. And sixth, despite an extra pit stop with a bit of damage early on, Peter Gerlings and Bert Langevin. David Fairbrother and Jordan Witt seventh, also with a time penalty. Eighth, Klaus Angerhofer and Hubert Trunkenpoltz. Oliver Freimut ninth after a spin. And then Rupert Atzberger and Peter Cox 10th after 2 drive-throughs and a fairly checkered afternoon, but at least they got to the end. So all 10 starters finished, and we had some very good racing along the way.
Yes, we did. Very entertaining once again, and I have to re-highlight the fact that you don't need 40-odd cars to have a fantastic race. You know, these guys have been so entertaining all day in both races. It's been really good fun to cover it, and to be honest, it's got a really, really promising amount of potential to grow in future, as Stefan Rattel said there.
Now, let's catch up on matters AM as well. It is a win for Chris Rosenberger and Hans-Joachim Stuck, and they're with Gemma Scott.
Chris, Hans, a fantastic result. We can see the smiles even though you've got the masks on. Hans, you're literally German royalty here.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. I can't find any words. To me, as a really old fart, you know, being able to race for KTM with my fantastic teammate Chris, to be on the podium twice. I mean, what can I say more? Oh, happy day! That's it.
I'm happy. I just have to follow him to the podium because he's been here once or twice, you know, so I just follow him around, so all is good.
A fantastic performance. Well done to both of you. Both seem to have really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks to SRO doing a great job.
Thank you.
Well done, Gemma. Hans Stuck, irrepressible as ever, brilliant character.
Oh, never change. Never change.
And as quick as ever as well. I mean, there's not much Hans hasn't raced. Double Le Mans winner, raced in Formula 1, DTM, the halcyon days of Group C sports cars, you know, GT era of Le Mans for Porsche, and now in these GT2s. It still seems wrong calling him an AM, but we've explained that it's because of one's age and how you get downgraded through the FIA's driver categorisation. But yes, just still an absolute hero is Hans Stuck.
He is so entertaining on and off the track as well. And
yes.
Like you say, the pedigree of everything that he's been through is just absolutely amazing. And the thing is, he's still got the love for it. And that's something that, you know, we can all just aspire to be like when we get to his age, you know.
Came to Shelsley Walsh a few years ago to drive the Auto Union that his father had driven there in the 1930s and drove in the period clothing and really attacked it, did it all properly.
Fantastic.
To the podium we go. There, Michael Verkers and Aurelius Rustica, third in the Pro-Am category at the end of the second race of the weekend. There for second place, Stefan Rattel steps up onto the podium, and Luca Piri. And then for win number 3 of the season, a victory for Mark Patterson and Anders Fjordbach. 2 out of 2 this weekend, 3 out of 4 for the season, and very much the benchmark team. Well done there, Mark Patterson and Anders Fjordbach. And impressive as it is, the opposition goes away with a bit of head scratching now as to exactly how to combat the Audi.
Yeah, and they try and get that Porsche to get around a corner as well. But to be fair, you know, they've put up an incredible fight in that Porsche all day long, and it's been so entertaining to watch. I know I keep saying it, but it's genuinely been amazing to watch.
Yeah, I think the Porsche won the fight rather than the drivers, but I take your point.
I was going to say, yeah, definitely.
So they're the drivers from Pro-Am leave the podium, and the announcement called now to bring forward the top 3 provisionally within the AM category. So there for third place, the drivers of the number 17 KTM, in other words, Klaus Angerhofer and Hubert Trunkenpolz.
Standing on the top step, bless him. Love it.
Everyone has their moment of glory.
Oh, they do.
For second place then, there you have Christoph Lenz and Christoph Ulrich. Christoph Lenz, who has been a regular of the last few seasons within the Lamborghini Super Trofeo, and he makes his way now onto the podium. And then for the top step, it is going to be Chris Rosenberger and Hans Stuck, who lets his gentleman co-driver go first. And Hans Stuck with yet another trophy for the collection.
Oh, I can imagine he's got a rather large cupboard full of them at home, and I'd love to see it one day. Flipping heck, what a bloke. But a great race all the same, and really well-deserved win for those guys, because to come through right from the back of the pack and end up in the top 4, it's just awesome stuff. Not only a class win as well, but an overall decent result for them. So they can be very, very pleased with their efforts this weekend. And they look forward to the next one at Misano, which, to be fair, thinking about it very quickly, that's going to be a very difficult track for some of those cars to get around. There's quite a lot of start-stop stuff there, while mixed in with quite a few quick corners as well. Kind of similar to this place in ways.
It's got a lot of corners, and that's perhaps not great for the Porsche. Christoph Lenz, a quick word about, having talked about the fact that he's been on the podium, he is also out for the first time. It was Adrian Speshka that drove that car at Monza, and making his first outing in the championship to good effect. So well done to the drivers then, out of Pro-Am. They make their way from the podium, the last few photographs taken. And as Chris Rosenberger and Hans Stuck pose, let's have a look at the highlights then of a lively second race for the Fanatec GT2 European Series, which began with Anders Fjordbach charging away from pole position down towards turn 1, chased hard by Michael Vergers, who was on his toes. On the outside line, Luca Piri, and they've managed to wriggle their way out of the first corner, all of them running wide in that big, big braking zone. And straight away, Vergers on the attack, getting himself up past Bert Langevin. He briefly attacked for the race lead, and both Vergers and Fjordbach ran out wide. Langevin also briefly made his move. Peter Cox was with them as well. But in the end, there was the Porsche to ease its way through into second place. Peter Cox arrived on the tail of Bert Langevin, and there was contact as well between the two coming out of the approach to the stadium. And for that, Peter Cox was given a drive-through penalty. There was also a little bit of damage on the Audi, but it was in strife anyway. And then Jordan Witt was hard at work in the Lamborghini, trying to get him up the order. He copped a 5-second penalty for track limit abuse, as Oliver Freimuth, having had an AM win early on in the day, lost it coming out of turn 2. Drive-through penalty for Peter Cox served, and as Fjordbach building the race lead in the number 33 Audi, as he needed to because he had an extra 10 seconds to serve in the pits. Bodywork opened as Chris Rosenberger took over 24. It was like a hat tip as he went up towards turn 2, carried on in the race with no further dramas, although post-race under investigation for a pit stop infringement. Driver changes, Vergers to Rustiker, Fjordbach to Mark Patterson, who rejoined in the lead and built that lead, as Aurelius Rustiker then copped a 5-second penalty for exceeding track limits. So also did David Fairbrother and Jordan Witt's Lamborghini, and that meant that Stefan Rattel, third on the road, hunting down Rustiker, would take second place on the corrected times, and it also meant that unchallenged up front was the high-class racing Audi. Anders Fjordbach and Mark Patterson coming through to win both races at Hockenheim and to make it 3 out of 4 in the Fanatec GT2 European Series. For now, from Germany, from Chaz Dracott and David Addison, auf Wiedersehen.